The vibes remain immaculate as Auburn takes down Alabama in Tuscaloosa.
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zac Blackerby, and thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. Lindsay Crosby over at the barn, auburn.com, hanging out with us as he does every single Monday. Lindsay, we're going to talk about a little bit of action that happened with Auburn baseball this week, and we'll get that towards the end of the show. The timing of Auburn's schedule versus their main competitor in the SEC, it's perfect. It's perfect. Put it on a canvas and hang it in a museum. Also, Auburn lands one of, if not the best JUCO player in, I guess, in that level of competition. And we'll talk about Abdul Bashir in just a second. But the historic setting, the historic show, I mean, there was so much hype going into number one versus number two, first time in SEC history, and the Tigers take care of business. Obviously, they beat Alabama. And it's just, no matter what angle you look at, this is just an incredible victory, an incredible moment for Bruce Pearl and these Auburn Tigers. Lindsay.
Pour one out for the coaches poll, because everybody cared about the coaches poll for like 4 days, and now it's all dead to everybody again.
But what a 4-day stretch for the coaches poll. Though.
Hey, that's the greatest 4-day stretch the coaches poll's ever had, honestly.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
The big thing to me here was like 9-point victory, right? But 94-85. It honestly didn't feel like it was that close. Now, granted, there's times when it was tied, mind you. This was the first time Alabama has not led a single minute of a game all year. The best they could do, they dropped a kill shot on Auburn, a 10-0 run. They tied it up, and then Auburn pulled away. Now, I want to say the stat was like in the end, in clutch time, Auburn was like 8-10 from the floor, and Bama was like 4-13 or something like that. And it's just, they came out and gave you theoretically the second best or best team in the country, depending on your poll you use, came out and gave you the absolute best they could do in their house.
Yeah.
And you almost won by double digits. Dominant.
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, I do think Alabama's the second best team in the country. And I think I'm excited that we get to see this again in a few weeks in Neville. More on that in a second. But I just think the message that Auburn sends over and over and over again, it's just, anytime we say, like, are we expecting too much of this team? They find a way to say, no, you're not, because we have the chance to do something historic. Like, they're that good. And the fact that their two losses so far are Duke and Florida, two teams that are going to be highly seeded in the NCAA tournament. They're highly ranked in all of these polls, whichever one you want to look at. And then you just look at the remaining schedule, not to give too much away. I mean, it's pretty obvious, but it gets considerably easier, and your margin of error has grown a little bit because of what you did in Tuscaloosa on Saturday. And I mean, we're talking about, multiple championships that are on the table here with the SEC regular season. I think they're going to be in a prime spot for the SEC tournament. And then I think the sky's the limit as far as however big you want to dream in the NCAA tournament. Like, you can do it, because, I mean, I put myself in this boat. I doubted this team going into it. I picked Auburn in every single show I went on last week, and it was a bunch. I'm like, I think Auburn loses close. And it was a similar song that we've seen be sung up until like a few minutes left in the game. And there was like 5 or 6 minutes left. And it's just, they're exchanging threes, they're exchanging fast breaks. And it's like, what is happening? Like Daryl said, this is pure cinema in the post-game show. And it was. It's like, what are we watching? Like, this is basketball, like greatness that we're seeing from both of these teams. But then something that we saw at the end of this game was different from what we've seen from Auburn teams in Tuscaloosa over the past few years, is they answered. And you had Tahad Pettiford, a true freshman, close the freaking game out. And I think when you have a guy like that who just does not care about your feelings, does not care about how big the moment is. In fact, he craves it. And there's a lot of folks that train for that moment, Lindsay. There's a lot of folks out there that say, hey, yes, I want to be the guy in that moment. But Tahad Pettiford lives it every single day. When the moment is big and the game is on the line, Tahad Pettiford finds a way to answer.
Of his 13 points, 11 were in the second half, like 4 for 6 from the field after halftime. And I remember like seeing that run of Alabama and they tie it up. And what's the first Auburn points to take the lead back? Pettiford 3-pointer. Something where he just like he's facing Sears and Holloway a lot in that half, and they just cannot seem to figure out how to defend him. He's a young player, but he comes off the bench and just, I'm not going to say beats Aiden Holloway, but like is more impressive than the other 5-star guard on the floor at that given time. And it just was, it was impressive. And like you can make that kind of case about so many guys, right? Janai Broome early, the first couple minutes of the game. It was just like, he was like 8 points, a defensive stop, and assist in like the first 4 minutes. You can look at like Denver Jones just kind of being clutch on defense and locking dudes down, and second most points on the team. Like there's just so much that every single player just about was able to contribute. I'd be surprised if there was more than maybe 2 or 3 guys who were negative in the plus minus. It just felt like almost everybody on Auburn's team had a role in that win.
Yeah, Chris Moore plus 17 in 9 minutes of action. That was insane. Chris Moore's got a lot of haters in the Auburn fan base, and I think he does a lot of the dirty work that people don't want to give credit for, and so I was really pumped for him in that moment. Yeah, there was a tweet I was trying to find. I had it pulled up, and I can't find it anymore. But like, you look at what Tahad Pettiford has done against these elite teams. Against Houston, 7 of 12 for 21 points. I'm having to do this on the fly here. Iowa State, 5 of 10 for 14 points. And I think a lot of that was in the second half. I don't have that in front of me. Against Duke, he was 8 of 15 for 20 points. I think he had 3 or 4 threes in that game. He was 4 of 8 from 3 in that game, which is stupid. Purdue, he had 18 points. Against Tennessee, only 8, but think about how hard it was to score points in that game. Like 8 points in that Tennessee game is the equivalent of scoring like 18 to 20 in a normal game. It feels like. Yes.
I have, as of Sunday morning, I have his cumulative stats versus ranked teams for you if you want that.
Give it to me.
14.8 points per game.
Okay.
On 48% from the floor, but 43% from 3. 2.5 assists per game on 21 minutes of action. He's shooting greater than 43% from 3 against ranked teams. Like there's a reason Auburn has more quad 1 wins than any other 2 schools in the country put together. And it's things like that where these guys are getting better when they face better opponents. Like at this point, part of you almost kind of thinks that like any game against a top 10 team is really kind of a toss up, right? Like anybody can win that game. But it feels like that 15 to 25 team has no shot against Auburn, but you get some sort of like, back of the SEC team and who knows what's going to happen. But like Pettiford's been amazing against ranked teams. All these dudes just step their game up in crunch time and against great teams. And we saw it again on Saturday where the end of that game was not nearly as close as you thought it would be when it was tied halfway through the second half.
No, you're right. They went on the run, and anytime there was a run, this Auburn team was able to match it. And that's what great teams do. And this Auburn basketball team is indeed great. And they want to stay great. So they're adding more and more talent. Abdul Bashir, very excited about this guy. We talk about what his commitment means to the Tigers next, right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Lindsay, can you imagine wagering anywhere other than our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook?
I absolutely could not imagine, and more so, I would dare not try it because FanDuel has everything. They have all the major sports. They have the best lines. They got college baseball, folks.
They do have college baseball. Staying on the theme of basketball for this show, you can bet on Auburn plus 300 to win the NCAA men's championship, which you got to love. They also have Auburn at minus 700 for Auburn to win the SEC. Feel like that's pretty close to a lock, which is why that's minus 700 is what it is. We'll talk more about that in a second. And then to reach the Final Four, minus 160 to reach the Final Four. That is crazy. That is crazy. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA, and, of course, the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. The Tigers take down their rival in the biggest game in SEC basketball history. And then the next day, Auburn lands the commitment from one of, if not the best, depending on where you look, JUCO players in this class. Abdul Bashir, he plays at Casper College. It's apparently up in Wyoming, which is cool, which is neat. This guy averages 25 points, 25.3 points a game at Casper this season. Extremely long, extremely athletic. And I mean, you just look at the pictures of this guy that he's posted wearing Auburn jerseys. Like, the guy just looks like what Bruce Pearl has attracted over the last several seasons here. Athletic, long, big, a guy that can make you hurt on both sides of the floor. There's nothing to not like about the addition of Abdul Bashir to this recruiting class.
Yeah. 42% from the field, 37% from three. He can score from all three levels. It's just kind of like absurd. He can play point guard. He can play shooting guard. He can play small forward. And here's the big thing.
He's 6'7".
He loves Bruce Pearl. Who doesn't love Bruce Pearl?
Who doesn't love Bruce Pearl?
Surprising number of people on the internet, but they're wrong. They're
Couldn't
totally
imagine
wrong.
that.
What other college basketball coach would finish knocking off the number 2 team in the country in their house and would stop by Home Depot to try to protect their plants from getting eaten by deer?
How funny is that?
Only Bruce Pearl.
Such a relatable moment.
Like he hadn't even changed clothes from the game.
It was just that important to him.
And on the way home, he stopped to buy fencing at Home Depot in Alex City. I've been to that Home Depot. Like,
sure. Well,
I ran into Bruce Pearl walking out of Kroger a couple weeks ago, and just, he just was like, started chatting with me. I'm like, hey,
when he first got here, I ran into him at a local grocery store as well. And like, he was looking at barbecue sauces, and I'm like, which barbecue sauce you go with, Coach? He's like, I don't know. I feel like I want to switch it up this time. Okay. All right. Like, this guy is doing his own.
Which one sponsors our program? That's the one that I will eat.
Yeah, no kidding. And I'm sure there is one. I don't know what it is. I'm sure there is one.
But back to Bashir. Listen, loved him on Deep Space Nine. So great. Great character arc. Not the
what
same
does that
Bashir.
mean?
Dr. Bashir was a character on Star Trek Deep Space Nine. I'm sorry.
Okay. No, that went over my head, buddy. I'm so sorry.
I'm sure that was a great joke. And you're on YouTube in the comments, let me know I'm not alone here.
Okay. Yeah. Somebody bail Lindsay out on this one. But yeah, I mean, you look like the 6'7", 37% from three. Like, this just, like, what else do you want? What else do you want? And let's think back about like what the issue was when these Auburn teams ran out of gas, super competitive in conference play, and some even won the SEC. But like, there were questions on, okay, like, where's the perimeter scoring coming from? Mm-hmm. And then you look and see what he's done really the last 2 portal cycles, especially this past offseason. But, bringing in Miles Kelly, they brought in Denver Jones 2 years ago. And it's like, it's just this, everybody on this roster now can shoot threes. And they go out and, you look at who's coming in already this offseason with Abdul Bashir, and then Simon Walker, that's part of this class from Huntsville, Caden Magwood.
2 combo guards.
Yeah, the Kentucky kid, and then Sebastian Williams Adams. Like, I mean, you just get all these guys that are super dynamic that are coming in, and it's like, yeah, okay. He realized what the issue and the shortcoming was for these rosters, and he's saying, let's fix this so it doesn't happen again.
Can I be that guy that kind of point out the last Auburn team that was like generationally great at shooting threes was the Final Four team? Sure. I feel like the highest achieving versions of those Auburn teams of Bruce Pearl's in the past have been those teams that just 3 or 4 dudes could go out there and knock down threes whenever you needed one. And like
their numbers though prior to that Kentucky loss, which was most of the season.
Yeah.
They were fun. They just got hot, dude. They just got hot and didn't cool off until they really didn't even cool off against Virginia. It was just a pace of play thing. Like,
and a double dribble that wasn't called.
100%. 100%. But yeah, I mean, so anytime you get yourself in a situation, both from a roster construction standpoint and I guess just overall like coaching preparedness standpoint, you got a shot. Much like this team has a shot, much like next year's team will have a shot because a lot of these guys are going to be coming back. You're losing a lot. You're obviously losing a lot, but you can already kind of tell what he's trying to do to replace some of these guys, which is exciting nonetheless. So Abdul Bashir, nobody's arm should be that long. It's just crazy. Like that dude does not need to lean over to tie his shoes.
It is surprisingly like he's dribbling a basketball between his knees, I think, in the graphic. And like his hands are even with his knee. I don't understand. It reminds
he's like
me
barely leaning forward in that graphic.
Reminds me of that Indiana Jones movie with the crystal skull aliens with the super long arms. Like that's what I'm thinking of here. It's wild. This has gone off the rails, and I apologize, people. I'm baseball minded from this weekend.
No, that's okay. You've worked a lot this weekend. You've done a great job over at the bar in Auburn.
Thank.com.
I'm trying. College baseball's back. We'll get to that in a second. The timing of the schedule for Auburn is perfect. It's absolutely perfect, and it's going to help Auburn a ton when it comes to collecting hardware, hanging banners, and potentially setting themselves up for a national championship run. That's next right here on Locked On Auburn. Thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. So Auburn takes care of business. Number one, beat number two. They beat Alabama. Can't stress that enough. They beat Alabama on Saturday.
Wait. Who lost the game?
Alabama lost.
Oh, okay.
And Auburn won.
Auburn won the game. Okay.
They won.
Okay. Yeah. What about Pat Adams? I was watching for Pat Adams. What did he do?
Pat Adams always wins. I mean, Pat Adams is really the genius in all of this. Where like, no matter what, he always wins.
I hate having to know a college basketball referee's name.
Oh, yeah. We never should. We never should. That's against whatever. We've given Pat Adams enough credit. So the next 3 games for Auburn, all at home. Arkansas at home, Georgia at home, Ole Miss at home. In my opinion, Ole Miss is by far the best of these 3 teams.
Right.
But like they slipped up against Mississippi State, Auburn won in Oxford. There's no reason to think that Auburn should lose any of these games. Then they go to Kentucky and to A&M.
Which, okay, yeah.
Very tough. Everybody's pointing at Lexington. I think at A&M is tougher. A&M might be 6 when the poll drops later today. Like, we don't talk about A&M like the team that they're ranked. Are they as good as the team, like their ranking? I don't know. My gut says no, but I don't know who I'd put ahead of them. I think they're certainly deserving of where they're ranked. They're just not. When you talk about like the top teams in the SEC, you go Auburn, Alabama, Florida, Tennessee, and then it just seems to stop. And then you like jump to the dark horses, right? Where like, oh, if Ole Miss gets hot or what's Georgia doing or whatever. Like you don't get a whole lot of A&M. And A&M's a good basketball team. So you go to Kentucky, to A&M, then you host Alabama. Once again, you beat Alabama on the road. You got to assume you could beat them at home. Similar situation to Ole Miss and Georgia. Alabama is better than those teams. But the team that Auburn is racing with the most is Alabama for that top spot in the SEC.
And just to reiterate, they are behind you because you beat them.
Correct. Thank you for driving that point home. Can't stress that enough.
Alabama lost.
Alabama's schedule to close out the season is insane. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
The tournament starts now for them, really.
It feels like it. So they go to Columbia on Wednesday. They host Kentucky. They host Mississippi State. They go to Tennessee. They host Florida, and they go to Auburn. They end the season in Knoxville, hosting Florida, going to Auburn. That is brutal. That is a brutal stretch. And so like, when you look at the remaining situation for Auburn, I think the most likely option is they lose one game. I don't know if I'm predicting that, but I do think that's the most likely option is they drop one of those 2 road games when you talk about at Lexington or in College Station. And with you having a 1-game lead, or I guess, is it technically a half of a game since you play Alabama again? Is that how that works? Or is it still just a 1-game lead and they have a chance to make it up at the end of the season?
It's still a 1-game lead.
Whatever.
They have to make it up.
So I just think worst case, realistic worst case. I know it's not mathematically worst case, but right. I think the realistic worst case is you drop a game or 2 you're not supposed to. Once again, not predicting that happens.
Right. But
you're in a situation where you're at home for essentially what would act as the SEC regular season championship against Alabama. Like, I think that's the worst case realistic situation, and I don't even think that happens.
Can I give you a fun fact I just found courtesy of ESPN?
Fun fact.
Remaining strength of schedule. Auburn is 13th. Alabama.
This is within the SEC?
No, this is in the country.
In the country.
In the country.
13th. Alabama 1 or 2.
1.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, it is the hardest strength of schedule left in the entire country. And they've got to go virtually undefeated to have a chance to overtake Auburn late. Like, holy cow.
Let me ask you this, and folks watching or listening, chime in, because I'm curious. Would you rather just take care of business and Alabama drop another one to where you hosting Bama at the end of the season doesn't matter? Like, it mathematically doesn't matter when it comes to standings and seedings? Or do you want that game to mean something?
So we are 21-4. I'm sorry, they are 21-4. We are 23-2. But I never want...
in this case, it's like the SEC record.
It's like the SEC record, yeah. But I never want to be the favorite in a game that mathematically doesn't matter. Because it's almost a no-win situation, right? If you win that game, it's, well, okay, there was nothing they could do to improve their anyway, right?
Sure.
But if you lose that game, it's like, you're lucky that we dropped a game somewhere else, because we'd have just passed you in the standings had we not lost this game. Like, there's no upside for Auburn. Like, they're not going to take their foot off the gas against Alabama in that finale, because it's Alabama. If it was Missouri to close the season, sure, great. Let's go ahead and end it now. There's no upside to going into that game with nothing left to play for. Now, Is it safer? Yeah, it's totally safer to be like, yeah, we can't lose the SEC here in this, but there's no upside for Auburn because they're not going to rest their guys. Janai Broom's not going to take a day off.
No, I guess that would be senior day too, right?
Yeah.
For a senior laden team. And so, you want to celebrate those guys too. So, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it. I got to think about that for a little bit. My answer is I want it locked up. I want to lock up and clench everything as quick as you possibly can. But I don't know. You always want those top games to mean something. So let us know. Let us know you're in the comments down below. If you're listening on audio, find us on socials or over at thebarnauburn.com and have that discussion moving forward. So long story short, Auburn's remaining schedule, extremely manageable. Alabama's, the main team you're racing against, is significantly tougher. Can they handle it? Sure, they're good enough to handle it, but that is certainly an uphill battle for sure. Auburn baseball wins the series against Holy Cross.
Mm-hmm.
They dropped that second game, which I thought was a little surprising. I'm not going to lie to you, Lindsay. As a guy who follows Auburn baseball, like I wasn't blown away, but it's the first series of the season. Butch Thompson has a proven track record of making sure teams improve over the course of the season.
Mm-hmm.
It's just kind of different what we normally see. Normally we see like pure domination in your non-conference. And so, winning 2 out of 3, obviously you take it, but we're kind of used to seeing these sweeps against these types of teams early in the season. Any level of concern for you?
Very minimal, right?
Good.
I mean, it is hard to win 3 games against any team. Like, not like even something like this. And there's a lot of ranked teams that dropped a game. Texas A&M, number one team in the country going into this weekend. They dropped a game over the weekend to Elon. Like a bunch of teams dropped games, but your 2 wins, 4-1 on Friday, 14-6 on Sunday, kind of domination from an offensive perspective. And that 2-4 loss on Saturday, Auburn had a ton of hard hit balls. They just could not find grass on. They actually had 3 line drive outs caught by infielders that were hit 103 or harder. Like it's really hard to ask for much more than what they were able to do from a batted ball perspective. And that's kind of the problem with baseball is sometimes the balls don't fall. Now, they had some errors on defense. They had some pitching issues here and there. And Cade Fisher actually left Friday's game with some lat tightness. So we're going to watch that a little bit. But I think they rebounded well enough on Sunday. The freshman looked really good. You said that to me before we got on the air. Yeah. The freshman looked really good offensively and on the mound. I'm not 100% like, we're winning the College World Series, but I still feel good about you saw a lot of really good stuff. Sure. You saw some avenues to grow, and this team can get there by, you hope, conference play and by regionals, where I think not only can Auburn make it back to regionals, I think you have a shot at hosting.
There we go.
Provided you can just get a little bit of settling of some roles of some guys down the stretch.
Yeah, no, absolutely love that. And Butch Thompson's been great at kind of using the non-conference to rotate guys, not only the rotation of guys on the mound, but also the batting order and all that. So I was surprised that Auburn didn't sweep, but you made me feel a little bit better about that Saturday loss as well just then.
Can I tell you a really funny thing I noticed on Saturday's game? We talked about this on the Barn Baseball Show, by the way. If you're into this, the Barn Auburn YouTube channel, go check it out. But at one point in time on Saturday's game, Auburn had 4 catchers in the game at once. Ike Irish had moved from behind the plate to right field. Cale Strickland came in behind the plate for him. Lucas Steele, who transferred in from Samford, he was the DH that game. Right. And then Chase Freilich had come in to play first base after somebody pinch ran for Cooper McMurray. So you had 4 catchers in the game at one time, and only one of them obviously was playing catcher, but 3 of the 4 were giving you defensive value. And I'm just like, that's the kind of that only happens in college baseball.
Yeah, that's super fun, though, because you had an exclusive. You and Brad Law did an exclusive interview and show with Butch Thompson, and that was one of the first things you asked him.
On top of the War Eagle wall was like, hey, you got 4 catchers. Cool. How are you going to use them? And he's like, we know we have plans on this. There's ways to get them all in the game at the same time.
And he did it. He didn't waste any time. That's crazy.
Game 2. It was great. Speaking
of not wasting any time, I mean, the story of the weekend, and I'm actually mad at myself for not leading off the baseball discussion with this, but Cade Ballou. His mother passed away Friday morning, and my understanding is his thought was I want to play. She would have wanted me to play. That seems to be kind of what I took away from it.
Yeah,
she passed
his
away game from Friday cancer. Night was I mean, it's so much bigger than baseball.
Yes, she passed away from cancer on Friday morning. He called Butch. Butch told us it was 7:13 in the morning. He knew the exact time when Cade called, told him what happened. They talked for a few minutes, kind of, father figure to play.
Yeah, sure.
And Cade said, I want to play. I think she would have wanted me to play. I want to play. And Butch said, okay, handle some of your stuff. I'll see you at meal and everything. Yeah. And Butch said he called his dad. He called Cade's dad and said, obviously gave him his sympathies and everything. He knows all the parents. And he said, Cade told me he wants to play. And I'm his baseball coach, but you're his dad. What do you want him to do? And his dad said his mother would have wanted him to play. So I'm okay if you want to put him in the lineup. And he goes 2 for 4, hits a home run. Just an amazing night. And I was able to get confirmation from the program on Saturday. He got the ball back. The fan that caught the ball gave the ball back so that he could have that baseball that he hit for a home run on the day his mother passed, because baseball is the best.
It's pretty crazy. That's what an incredible moment. What an incredible moment.
The best possible ending to the worst possible situation is what I've been calling this.
Yeah, right. So, thoughts and prayers for the Blue family. I'm glad they got to have that moment because I'm sure everybody in this family kind of got to share that together. It's more than just him winning in that situation. So
absolutely.
Lindsay, you already kind of mentioned it, but how can folks check out everything that you've got going on?
The Barn Auburn, whether it is the message board, I'm dropping nuggets in there all the time, or the Barn Baseball Show, where we're coming out multiple times a week. It's me, it's Sonny DeShera, it's Brad Law. We're talking ball, we're interviewing players, we're interviewing coaches like Butch Thompson. Totally worth your time if you like baseball.
Yep, absolutely. Hey, please like the video, please subscribe, and we'll see you next time. This has been Locked On Auburn.